This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Do you remember the crazy and outlandish Twitter post that I talked about in a video the other day where someone actually thought West Virginia could be kicked out of the Big 12? Well, I'm actually going to bring on the person who made that crazy take. He had the guts to come on here today and face me and discuss this matter. Mr. Bill Farley will be joining the show, and he'll join us right after this word from our sponsor. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner. Come on in, make yourself comfortable, belly yourself up to the bar. Let me pour you out another shot of top-shelf college football content. On tap today, we are joined by a special guest, the one who I called out a few days ago, or a few shows ago, about the outlandish take that he actually thought 4 schools, including the Mountaineers, could be booted from the Big 12 in order to make room for Florida State and Clemson. And this gentleman's name is Bill Farley. He is a writer on Substack, and he's also a finance guy who does a lot of studying and research around college athletics. But without further ado, I'm going to bring him on, Mr. Bill Farley. Bill, how you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate have the chance to talk with you about college football realignment.
Absolutely. And Bill, I gave you an intro there, but I probably botched it. So go ahead and tell the fine folks where they can find you, your work, and what it is exactly that you do.
Okay, so I'm on X. You got at the top there at Bill Farley, PhD. I also have a Substack, billfarley.substack.com. And on that site, what I do is I collect documents, realignment-related documents through public records request, and then I analyze them, compare them with other documents I secure. So, for example, I have all the, I have all the Big 12 agreements for new members like Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado. I've got Cincinnati's, and what I compare those documents and look for ways of how they constructed. If that gives you any clue in terms of the priority that was given to that particular school, or maybe what else they might be doing. I've got one comparison set where I look at what maybe potential litigation there could be based on reading some of the documents. So on the Substack site, you'll see documents that you can download. It's free. It's a free website. My analysis. I also occasionally do academic articles that go through peer review. I look at university financing. So I've got like 3 levels. I've got the peer-reviewed articles, obviously, which take a year or 2 to develop. Then I've got my Substack, which are usually quick reads, maybe 5 minutes, and then documents download. And then on X, what I'll do, occasionally I'll take a clipping from some of those documents, and I'll give a take, which in this case, the one you mentioned was described as crazy, garbage, fraudulent, and many other terms. So I'll walk through that particular tweet and explain what I was trying to get to.
Right.
I picked the wrong team to put on the outs. I should have picked somebody else. But
I don't think you realized what you were walking into, did you?
Yeah, no, I should have picked, probably Kansas State. I probably should have gone with them. It is interesting when I get, and I enjoy the feedback. So when I find that there's an extreme interest from a fan base, I listen to the critique. I listen to the comments, because in all those comments and criticism, I learn things. I learn a perspective that maybe I didn't have. It helps me then when I look at the documents, I can look at them from a different perspective. And in fact, I watched your episode with Wild Ute, where he kind of went through brands and media markets. And I've got one of his slides in my presentation, and I'll show you how I kind of took that and learned something from it and applied it that would provide good information for West Virginia fans in terms of what their position is relative to the rest of the Big 12 schools.
Right. Well, I respect the fact that you were willing to come on the show, even though I may have taken exception to what you wrote. You were willing to face the music, as they say, and I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to a productive conversation around this. Hopefully, maybe both of us can learn something here. And it's also caused me to do some more research on my end to see what am I missing as a West Virginia fan, you know? So I'm looking forward to this conversation. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and jump right into your slides if you want.
Sure. Do I click that? There we go. So my intent of the tweet, which was on the right, was just to show we know about poaching teams into new conferences. We've heard about that in realignment. We've seen how the Big 12 was able to take $30 million for 4 schools and then basically pick off the 4 corner schools by offering them slots. And we saw how the Big 10 was able to add money to their account through Fox to be able to pick off Washington and Oregon. So poaching is one thing that's done, and that happens when a conference like the Pac-12 starts to disintegrate, and perhaps as we see the ACC maybe going the same direction. So I thought, in looking at the documents, every bylaws for different conferences has different vote totals you need to dissolve the conference. Some take a super majority, some take sometimes unanimous votes. In the Big 12 document, there was they need 3/4 votes. So with with 12 members, you need or 16 members, you need 12 voting one direction, and 4 can vote the other way, and you can still pass it. So my purpose in this particular one was for fans to think about not just the poaching side, but the purging side. Is your program at risk of being purged, and what are the tools that other teams have to do that, to enact that purging? So I provided the language that was in the document, and then I was just hypothesizing, if you purge 4, you could give a double share to Florida State and Clemson to attract them, so they would get, instead of $30 million each, they get $60 million each, and that would put them on par with the Big Ten and the SEC. So, so the roll call that I provided, now why did I pick West Virginia? I could think of the group of 5 schools seemed like a natural. And well, West Virginia was last alphabetically. No, I did give some thought to, I knew that their budget was low, and I knew there was a travel cost associated with them. After you take out UCF, Cincinnati, they're out there, and the travel cost could be a factor there. But I didn't do any scientific analysis, and this wasn't this isn't the kind of article that I would write for my Substack or in peer review. It was really just kind of a take on what could potentially happen. So for fans, what I think they should be aware of is how is their school being measured? What is their position in their conference? What is their AD doing to improve their position? And how do you hold your athletic department accountable for improving their position and making sure they don't get purged or other members of the conferences get poached? So that's what I want to cover today. I know there was a lot of discussion about brand value, so I want to cover some of those brand value scales that are out there and show why they may not be relevant in today's post-House settlement environment.
Okay.
So measuring brand value. So I looked at 5 different measures. They're kind of across the top of how programs measure brand value. And the first one, 247 Sports, they do an interview of high school athletes to say, do you recognize this school? So the first column is 247, and I've got West Virginia, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa kind of up at the top there because they weren't in the top 16, and I wanted to cover those as I go through them. So West Virginia was 33, and you can see kind of who the top 16 were, kind of the traditional ones that you would just brand awareness. Now, I would say for in today's world where you're paying athletes, the awareness of a high school athlete, which could have been really great for recruiting and making sure they come for visits, now the emphasis is going to be more on money, I think. So I don't think the student awareness value is going to be nearly as important as the NIL payments and the scholarships that are available. So it's going to be more money driven than awareness driven or even coach driven. So I think the 247 might be now kind of in the rearview mirror of a brand index that has any value. Forbes looks at the team value, which is the revenue and the profit generated by a football team, and they only go about 25 deep. And some of that data is really bad, so I'm gonna discount Forbes, and I'll explain why. I've got a graph on this. The revenue data on our football teams is horrible because the athletic departments haven't had to run each sport like a profit center in the past. Football makes a ton of money. The athletic department hires a lot of staff, funds a lot of Olympic sports, and there hasn't been a need to look at how much you have to reinvest in your football program now that salaries are going to be part of the equation. So I think the Forbes, if we had good revenue data from teams, and I'll get into a little more, then maybe that would be a good measure.
Okay.
Medium looks at home attendance, market size share, social media following, and TV viewership. But it's hard to tell which ones they rate more, which ones they balance, how they balance them between each other. I'm not sure home attendance matters much. We were talking off air about how Fresno State is always sold out, but they just don't have. They've got great attendance, but they don't have the market. They don't have the awareness. There's all sorts of factors that don't make them a great television product. 2023 TV ratings. I just picked just that 1 year. I'm going to go. Wild Ute on your show had a 5-year rolling number. I'm going to use that one here a little later. I think that's obviously a good measure for ratings. I think the 5 years probably better. And then Navigate. I want to talk about them because Navigate did an index once, and that's where West Virginia was really high.
Yep.
Let's go. Let me see here. So looking at Navigate's, now Navigate's a really good company. They do a lot of consulting. They're hired by a lot of schools to work on their brand and their revenue development. But their index, they published it 1 year. They did another update, and then it's kind of gone. And I think the reason that they're not updating it is just when you look at the elements of it, I'm not sure that it really makes that much sense. For example, revenue, fan percent of state population, number 3 in their index. Estimated number of fans divided by total populous state where the athletic department is located. Now you can see how West Virginia, being the predominant, probably the only brand that I can think of in West Virginia off the top of my head, and a smaller population, you're going to have a large fan base with a small state population. That's going to shoot you up the index pretty high. And does that really translate into television viewers? So I think that one, the Navigate one, I think just doesn't, and they're not publishing it anymore. I'm not sure that that's also that's a very good index of what CBS or ESPN or Fox or any of the media markets would really look at. So I have doubts about about that one. So let's go to the one that Wild Ute talked about, which I think is a really good one, and particularly for West Virginia fans. So Wild Ute, I've got the 2023 ratings number that I had previously there in the first column. Then I've got Wild Ute's 5-year average. And then what I've done is I've taken that I'm just saying $30 million per school. You add it all up, there's $480 million to split for the ones that we have the data. So if you split that based on viewership over Wild Ute's 5-year average, West Virginia should be getting more. They should be getting almost $39 million instead of $30 million. And you've got schools who are, dragging the conference down, like Arizona, in terms of viewership. They should maybe be getting $17 million. So this is kind of looking at it on a performance-based revenue sharing model based on a 5-year rolling average of TV viewership. And that's where West Virginia is one of the top in the group. And that's where the money is. So it was kind of a aha moment for me when I saw Wild Ute's numbers. And, well, let me put some dollars behind this so it could actually go from just a number to an actual dollar number. And where
Gotcha.
this is important for West Virginia, West Virginia's got a low budget. So their operating revenue for all sports is near the bottom of the Big 12 for the ones that report. It's the bottom for football.
Correct.
So if you added, say, $44 million is what they have reporting now. If you added that nearly $9 million to their budget on a performance basis, they'd be right in the middle of the pack. So they're not getting the benefit of unequal revenue sharing or incentive-based revenue sharing, and so they fall towards the bottom. So I think from a West Virginia standpoint, I would be, this would be something the athletic director. Now we had in the Pac-12 we had USC and always clamoring for this incentive-based revenue.
Right.
Of course, they didn't get it and they left. And I imagine Texas and Oklahoma were on the same warpath and they didn't get it and they left. Florida State and Clemson. I know Florida State thinks this way and they're not going to get it and they'll try to find somewhere else to go. So the incentive-based approach would give them a significant boost. Now, in terms of chasing media, so media, getting media viewers, getting the dollars from that is really what drives budgets these days. This is a post Tony Altimore that I think is worth kind of revisiting, which is you really have 50% of the viewership comes from 18 top schools, and then it kind of drops off significantly. So, and this is my kind of fear, is that we're all, schools like Oregon State and West Virginia and the Big 12 and some of the ACC schools, you're chasing to get into the top 15, top 50% of viewership, but that's a huge hill to climb. And at what expense do you go to get into that top 15? Because if we're going to have a super league of 15 or 20 schools, is it really wise for everybody to be chasing that? You either have to be, I think, be extremely cautious about it and think about different alternatives, or you just have to go all in, which to me would be the purge approach, where you purge teams, you incentivize people, you cut programs, Olympic sports programs, and you put all money in your football and you try to compete with these top 18 brands or so, which is a real roll of the dice and a real aggressive approach. So I think that's the debate I think that'll be coming. And then I want to talk a little bit about how bad the data is right now to really defend. It'd be hard for me to defend my numbers on placing West Virginia at the bottom because the data is so bad. And here's an example. In Sportico's database, you could look at operating revenues of West Virginia. It says 44 million for football on the far left, but then you've got a number that says non-sport specific, 42 million. Well, that's a massive number to be non-specific. Usually you want to see something is around 5% or 10% that's non-specific. But if you look at the pie chart for non-specific on the right, here's donations, ticket sales, conference distributions. I mean, that looks to me like a lot of football stuff. And the athletic departments haven't had to really break that out, because we've had this model in the past where we're not looking at how do we pay for the house settlement for football? How do we get, top football players? How do we keep top coaches? So the focus on money is going to come in greater, but our accounting systems that we have now from a fan perspective leaves us a little wanting, because we don't know how much West Virginia's football program is generating. 44 million is what's publicly reported and what you'll see in things, but really it could be 60 million, it could be 70 million. And all the profit that you make, I think every Power 5 program is profitable, and all the profits go to athletic department staffs and Olympic sports. So if you want to compete, do you make that difficult change to start reducing your Olympic sports and putting money back in football? So we've got a data problem.
Gotcha.
And then one place, real kind of lastly, West Virginia, this was a report. University of Arizona Athletic Department did a department audit where they looked at all the Big 12 schools. And I think for Big 12 fans, it's a really good resource because they kind of dive into a lot of the numbers. But here's a growth revenue rate for West Virginia, again, trailing, but the revenue growth is hindered because you're not getting your performance-based media revenue. And you have a lot of numbers that are hidden within the athletic department that should be going to football potentially.
Right.
And then finally, so this is how I kind of look at if you're holding your athletic department accountable, you want to monetize that brand value, which I consider the media market to be the best. And by using unequal revenue sharing, you got to clean up the accounting, make it transparent so you know how much money football is making. You got to right size the athletic department. These athletic departments blew up because they provided services for athletes. Now they need to provide money to athletes. So they need to change their organizational structure to produce more money as opposed to services. And I think you'll need football investment standards for, you want Arizona to invest in football. You don't want them just taking the money and not, putting it into basketball or Olympic sports. I think there's going to be a talk about transitioning a lot of Olympic sports to the club or regional level, maybe in different conferences as opposed to the power conference. And then keep your conference commissioner in check. No private equity. I think the commissioners are incentivized to bring in lots of money because they can, their paycheck is based on the number of schools and the number of revenue. And, I saw the Pac-12 commissioner, bring in all these potential dollars through the Pac-12 network, never materialized, but he got big bonuses based on the theory. And then the last point is, chasing that top 18 slots, the SEC Big Ten Alliance, you got to either do it with caution or you got to do it with reckless abandon. You got to pick a road here. Is a fork in the road. Do you try to get into that top 20 and bring, the top teams to that level, or do you just kind of fall back into a group of 7 or a group of 8 type of situation? You let those two conferences pick their best and form a super league. And I think the Big West the Big Ten's West division has a lot of weaklings that would also fall out in that exercise. So that's my athletic department. So if I'm a fan, those are the things that I'm focused on.
Yeah. I want to address a couple of these. I wrote some notes down here.
Sure.
I'm going to push back on a few of your points, and
Sure.
then I also want to address a few of these bullets. The monetized brand value part, unequal revenue sharing. My fear there, and I like that, the thought behind that, but my fear as a West Virginia fan, and probably this goes for most teams in the Big 12, is what leverage do you have? You can go to the commissioner of the league and say, hey, we need unequal revenue sharing, but is there anywhere else you can go if they don't give it to you? That's going to be the challenge there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, I think, the votes, because you need the 3/4 votes, it would probably be difficult. But if you get them, if you're going to go after trying to compete in the top 20, you've got to get a focus on football, and you have to incentivize people that make the investment and do well.
Yeah.
And either that's through standards or by incentives or both. So if everybody's happy with just being, not going for the top 20 or the playoffs, just having one team in the playoff, for example, then I think you accept that and
right.
And you organize yourself that way. So that would be the kind of the cautious approach where you don't swing for the fences.
Right. And before we move on to the next one, I want to give a quick shout out to another sponsor here on the channel, BetUS, where the game begins. BetUS is offering a special right now, 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. If you want to bet on West Virginia games, if you want to bet on futures, whether it be Heisman Trophy odds, whether it be over-unders, whatever, do it with BetUS. You can check out the BetUS link in my description box, or you can do it at the link in the link comment below. Again, thanks to BetUS for being a sponsor here on the channel, and this show is powered in part by BetUS. Great point, Bill, about that, and appreciate you showing those bullets. The next one I want to talk about, the next bullet, is the cleaning up accounting. That one I totally agree with. Right-sizing the organization. I talked to Ren Baker a couple weeks ago, and he said he has promised all of his departments he's not going to do any cutting.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I was actually surprised by that.
Yeah.
Is he going to be able to keep that promise? I don't know. We'll see. He said he'd keep them all whole. He said they're going to do whatever it takes. Now, I do know West Virginia is in the process. I don't know how much you know about their stadium, but they do not have a whole lot of luxury suites.
Mm-hmm.
He said they're losing about $20 million a year. I think it's the number he used. I'll have to go back and listen again, but I think he said they're losing about $20 million a year of potential revenue just by not having enough suites alone. So that's something they're in the process of trying to improve and build more suites in the stadium. So hopefully that's one of the things he can do. You talked about keeping the AD accountable. I think that's something that, he is in the process of trying to improve on there. Yeah.
And then I would put that in the old model, that's kind of the old model approach that a lot of folks have done over the last 20 years. I just think with the new player payroll requirements that, you could potentially get it from the state of West Virginia. You can get it from the local governments. I did a post on Substack today where I took an example of a minor league baseball team that was able to get effectively $150 million of public financing just by saying they might leave, saying that the Major League Baseball put some standards on facilities and they needed an upgrade. And so they were able to get the city, the state, the county, and even a out-of-state public financing authority the ability, to arrange $150 million financing for a new stadium. And so you might be able to get more money into the system from your state. I think West Virginia, I've looked at how they subsidize economic development businesses and activity, and they're kind of on the lower end in terms of funding tourism and those type of activities. But it'd be worth a shot, and you could ask you're in your local, your host community. You could ask them to finance the luxury suites based on potential tourism. Some places are using tourism taxes to help build portions of stadiums. You got, I don't know if you have naming rights yet. So there definitely some revenue sharing pieces, but most people are doing those. So in order to get ahead of everybody else, you have to catch up by doing that. And then how do you get ahead or stay even with them? And I think some organizations are going to, athletic directors do not want to cut budgets. They're bureaucrats. They're public employees. They're bureaucrats like any state or federal employee. They don't want to cut their empire. They don't want to cut staff. So, and I've worked in public agencies, large corporations. There is just a very adverse reaction to trying to cut your empire, or cut your staff. But occasionally you get these moments where you see corporations cut 10% of their staff, 15% of their staff, because they just need to make a big shakeup. And that rarely happens in the government side. But I think athletic departments, they're full on privatization model, is coming at them with this House settlement. So they're going to have to sharpen their pencils.
Yeah. A few things I wanted to push back on in some of your bullet points there on your slides. You mentioned NIL. West Virginia is not Ohio State. They're not Alabama. They're not Texas A&M, but they are competitive in their NIL collective has been named one of the top most innovative collectives in the country, Country Roads Trust. So they are doing a pretty good job. Coach Brown has been able to retain most of his talent the last couple of off seasons. For the most part, he's been losing, third string guys or guys who weren't getting playing time, that kind of thing. Now it took them a couple of years to catch up. Yeah. But once they caught up, they are doing a better job of that. So I think West Virginia is, when you look at them versus their peer institutions, I think they're holding their head up just fine in that space. Again, not comparing them to Ohio State here.
Absolutely. But the only, a caution from a fan standpoint is the House settlement changes the NIL structure to where institutions can pay for play. So institutions will be able to take out of their budget and pay athletes. And then the outside collectives can pay for services. So they'll have to actually have, they'll have to be marketing something like a shoe brand or a car dealership. Yeah. So the model of pay for play from the outside group is getting shifted to in-house. Right. So you got to use your operating budget So where you get that money from? Can you afford to have the same operating structure you did before when you got to make room for pay for play within the athletic department? And I know that's still, we got to see how that plays out, but that's the one caution I'd give, is to say the old model, you caught up. Now the new model, how do you obviously have the desire to compete, and the outside folks, they can contribute to the athletic department, and that money can go to the athletes. But then how do you get that pay for service model and compete with large markets like a Los Angeles or, where there are more service opportunities, pay for service opportunities. So it's something to keep your eye out on.
Yeah. And that's fair. Because Noreen Baker even talked in our conversation about how, he said right now our budget is $105 million. Well, 20 million of that has to go to the athletes here in 2 years. Right. So he's definitely aware of that. And he's committed to making it work. He said they will figure out where they can cut, where they can add revenue. He said he's spending about 80% of his time right now dealing with this. So
I imagine
it's definitely a huge priority for him.
If we're a business and we're looking at our different, we've got 10 different businesses. One's making $40 million a year profit. One's making $5 million a year profit, men's basketball. And then we've got 8 that are losing money, and we're using the profit from football and basketball to pay for those losing sports ventures. We in this environment would say, hey, we got to, why are we dragging 8 programs along here when football is paying the bills, gives us our identity as a university, drives applications, drives admissions? Is there a different model for those Olympic sports now under this new revenue scheme that we're going into? So, and
that's fair. And now Ren Baker did not say anything about not changing conferences for the Olympic sports or not reorganizing those. Now he didn't. He just said he's committed to not cutting any programs right now. That's his commitment. That doesn't mean he can't move them around or make them more regional, whatever. So and I'm sure all that stuff's on the table. I would imagine. The other thing, and speaking of Ren, I want to talk about him. West Virginia fired Shane Lyons a little over 2 years ago, I guess now, and brought in Ren Baker. And one of the reasons they did that was because of Ren's ability. Number one, he was he accepted NIL a little more. Shane Lyons was extremely skittish about embracing NIL. He didn't want to do anything that might potentially get into a gray area with NIL. He wouldn't let coaches promote it. He wouldn't let coaches get involved at all, where Ren Baker is. That's just one example. He's also, his background, he's been a superstar when it comes to fundraising for his athletic departments. Yeah. So for me, West Virginia, then maybe they should have made this move earlier, but at least I think now they have a guy in the seat who is probably more suited for the role as far as in this new landscape.
Yeah.
Than Shane Lyons, who was he was more of a overseeing rules and, that type of thing, right? He wanted everything to be buttoned up.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think having people that are focused experience on revenue, and whether it's raising revenue under the old model versus raising revenue under the new model, they're going to be able to quickly adapt because they understand how revenue drives programs, what sources of revenues are. They know how to work with local communities, state governments. They're going to have that type of that type of mentality to work with a new group of potential partners to raise money. So I think having somebody that's been focused on money, even revenue, even though if it's maybe a different model, I think is good. Because you could definitely get comfortable under the old model and not focus on revenue because there wasn't this huge disparity in media revenue, and there wasn't the additional cost of player payroll. So you didn't have those revenue pressures, but now you do. So it seems like a move.
Yeah. And, you mentioned West Virginia's budget, and I agree their budget is lower compared to other teams in the Big 12. But to me, when you look at the fact that West Virginia has historically always been able to do more with less, it's what they've done their entire existence, pretty much. I don't foresee, let's just say theoretically that model you presented does happen. I just don't see how any commissioner or league would look at a team like West Virginia and base their entire brand value or brace whether or not they should be relegated based strictly on that, because they bring so much more to the table. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you showed in the
Yeah,
numbers there.
they're bringing, say, let's just say $8 million extra to the conference based on their brand recognition,
Right.
their media market, and if you could get some partners a little closer to them, you could take any negatives in terms of travel could be knocked out. So yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. And on the Navigate side, you talked about the model they use, and Navigate, according to Rim Baker, is one that the industry actually uses. Navigate. It's one of the ones they use when looking at brand value. So he considers that one of the upper echelon, one of a few upper echelon consulting firms or groups when it comes to that.
Consulting firm, yes, but brand. I think the brand index that they use is just a marketing piece to make universities feel good and kind of something that gets clicks when they post it on social media. I don't think that's a working part or an element of their model in terms of how they consult with universities. For example, if one of the elements is how big is your fan base relative to your state population, there's nothing they can take from that piece of the scale and consult with a university and say, oh, you should decrease your state population so your brand value goes up. Right. So I think and I see with a lot of these scales, people are just taking 3 or 4 things, throwing them together, and they're actually measuring whether they value something independently or if they have multiple things measuring the same thing. They're just throwing things together to create viewers to look at it, and for some people to feel good, and then some people to argue about it. I don't think that scale. The company is a good company. They got a lot of clients. The scale itself, I don't think. I don't think that has any value. So I don't think it's I wouldn't invest any money on that scale.
Yeah,
that scales.
That's fair, but I guess Arkansas wasn't on the list, and they are another team who they are the only Power 5 school in their state, just like West Virginia.
Yeah,
and so to
they
me,
got chicken money. They're like they're like Oregon with sneaker money.
Yeah,
I think Oregon and Arkansas are 2 outliers that are gonna, when their financial partners pass on. I did a tweet. I did an estimate. Phil Knight would have to leave $1.7 billion as an endowment to fund Oregon football to maintain the level of investment that he's been putting in on a year-to-year basis.
Wow.
Now, $1.7 billion would put them, in like the top 40. Just that endowment alone would be a top 40 endowment for all universities in the country. So the magnitude of money that Phil Knight has had to put in to Oregon to lift that brand is astronomical. And I think Arkansas is going to have the same problem. If the chicken money runs out, they're going to be in trouble, I think.
Right.
So I put Oregon and Arkansas kind of as 2 outliers that have just had phenomenal individual sponsors that nobody else. You can't recreate that. Oregon State has a multi-billionaire who's probably wealthier than Phil Knight, but he does NVIDIA. He's owner of NVIDIA chips, which is a huge company now. It's one of the top 3 or 4 companies in the world, value-wise. But he doesn't have any interest in sports. He put a lot of money into a computer science facility at Oregon State. But you just can't say get a Phil Knight and get a $1.7 billion endowment to help your program.
Yeah. I guess the reason I brought up Arkansas is because you used the argument that, of course, West Virginia is going to have a higher percentage of fans in their state because they don't have another big program. My point to that was Arkansas wasn't on that top 10 list, and they could make the same argument.
Yeah, they had 3 criteria. I picked on that one because it was the most obvious that you can't increase your brand rating with that statistic. That's a baked in statistic that you can't change necessarily because your state population is part of part of the evaluation, and your state populations don't change. So I picked on that one element of it. I could pick on the other 2, but I think again they don't really give the weighting of each one, why they picked each one. They just threw together 3 things, like a lot of these indices do. They just throw together things, and then it looks good for a lot of people. That where you're at the top, you love it. and then you argue about it if you're at the bottom.
Yeah, but just
But they're a good company, a great company in terms of consulting. It's just the scale is really just kind of an advertisement piece that they use to gin up interest in their company.
And when you speaking of Sportico real quick, when we were looking at them, what are your thoughts overall? I know you mentioned some flaws in their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing some research the other day, I discovered that West Virginia has not been getting hardly any bowl revenue money from the Big 12 for the past 5 years. And I don't know why that is. I've reached out to the university requesting with a FOIA request. I've not gotten a response.
Yeah. So about that,
I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah. So I started I was going to use Sportico for some analysis I was going to do. And one of the first, I looked at Oregon State's numbers, and they didn't have a baseball team. And I was like, well, I know they got a baseball team. I know they've got, 20, 30 players. I know, but there's no numbers in Sportico's database. So I got the actual source data. Each school sends in a form to the NCAA. Sportico takes that and puts it into their database, but there's obviously some data transposition errors in terms of taking that data and putting it into their system. So I'm really hesitant to even just, you really have to scrub that number. So what you get is West Virginia's actual filing, what they filed with the NCAA. And in that, you probably can see any missing obvious numbers that are missing because it may be something where they just dropped it in manually taking the number over. So I couldn't use Sportico for what I was trying to do in terms of data analysis because of those issues. I had to go get source documents.
I would like to find out if the Sportico number, if those numbers are just missing, or if for some reason, because some agreement West Virginia has with the conference, have they not been getting that bowl payout money?
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to know. But so far, I've not been able to track that information down, because if they haven't, there's your answer. They're $42 million behind everybody else in the conference over the last 5 years. That would put them in the top half of the league in revenue.
Yeah, I would suspect it's a data error, but I'll send you. I'll email you the phrase that's used. Maybe I'll be able to find it. There's a number or a form number that they use in their filing, and sometimes when you Google West Virginia University and the form number, it pops up on some website or some database. You can get it. That's how I got a handful of them to try to do an analysis. But you actually have to get it from the university or have access to the NCAA's database, which
right. I got you. Well, for those people who are still listening, I'm afraid we may have lost a lot of the listeners when you showed Tony Altimore's chart. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tony's relationship with the Big 12 fan base or not, but
no, I'm not.
It is not good.
Yes.
Just so you know. But anyway, he had some pretty harsh things to say about us. When I say us, not me personally. I don't think Tony and I don't have any personal beefs.
Okay.
I do know he does have some beefs with Big 12 fans out there because of some stuff he put out on social media during the whole Pac-12 situation. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I was being funny there, but in all seriousness, that I guarantee you I'll get at least one comment about that.
Yeah. Fair enough. No, I have seen some of that back and forth, and I just kind of get to set it aside.
Yeah, he called us Pac-12. He called us Pac-12 and on, or Big 12 and on, or something like that. I don't remember. Yeah. That was just one of a few things. But anyway, and we ended up all being right at the end of the day. So but nonetheless, Bill, one more time, let everybody know where they can find you and your work.
Okay, well, the easiest way is to get me on X at Bill Farley PhD, because that has a link to my Substack. And when I post an article on Substack, I'll post the link there, so you'll get access to everything that I post in my Substack by following me on Twitter. And feel free to comment, disparage, give me feedback, because all feedback is good feedback. I used, before I started working in college football financing, I did a lot of history writing, and you get no feedback. But when you're talking about college football, you have a lot of fans that are bright, have a lot of different, good perspectives. And so when you put stuff out there, you get good free feedback, and it can really improve your writing and your research. So
right.
All feedback is good feedback in my view.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I appreciate you coming on, like I said, and having the guts to do this after my not so kind words probably about your tweet there. But in all honesty, though, Bill does put out a lot of good stuff. I took exception to that one thing he had, but he's had some other stuff. I've done multiple shows on some of your stuff, Bill. So,
Yeah.
everything you put out, I do not have an issue with. But yeah, thanks to Bill again for coming on. Make sure you go check out his work on Substack. Follow him on X. He's a good follow. You'll learn something. I guarantee you'll learn something if you follow him. So thanks again, Bill. And I got to give a shout out one more time to my sponsors, BetUS and Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, attorneys at law. Thank them both for helping me keep the lights on here. Until next time, make sure you have a top shelf day and cue country roads.